Hey ho and welcome to my channel. Today, you're getting a Drarry one-shot and my first video in English. I hope you enjoy the video, and if you do, feel free to subscribe. Have fun watching! It was a cool autumn evening at Hogwarts. The air was filled with the scent of damp leaves, and the moon shone brightly over the Black Lake. Harry Potter sat on the stone steps in front of the Great Hall, letting his gaze wander over the quiet grounds. Hogwarts had been rebuilt after the war, but the scars remained, in the walls and in the hearts of those who had survived. Harry felt strangely empty. His heroic deeds were history, and the future seemed uncertain. He was just about to return to the dormitories when a cool, yet familiar voice spoke behind him. "Potter! Alone in the dark? Fitting." Harry turned around to see Draco Malfoy. His once arrogant face had softened, his silver eyes serious. He wore a simple black cloak, his hands buried in its pockets. "Malfoy," Harry replied curtly. "What do you want?" Draco shrugged. "I could ask why you're sitting here instead of celebrating with your famous friends. But I think we both have our reasons for avoiding crowds." Surprised by Draco's candid tone, Harry stayed silent. Finally, he patted the step beside him. Draco hesitated for a moment but then sat down. An unexpected calm settled over them. After a few minutes, Harry asked, "Why are you really here, Malfoy?" Draco took a deep breath as if to say something, but stopped. Finally, he murmured, "Sometimes I think the war changed all of us. I don't know who I am without all of it." Harry looked at him. For the first time, he noticed how tired Draco seemed, how much guilt and pain filled his eyes. This wasn't the boy he once hated. It was someone just as lost as himself, trying to move forward. "You're not the only one who feels that way," Harry said quietly. "But maybe we can help each other figure it out." Draco looked at him in surprise, and for a moment, a small smile seemed to flicker across his face. "That's an unexpected answer, Potter. Almost kind." Harry gave him a crooked grin. "Don't get used to it." Draco chuckled softly, a rare, genuine laugh that caught Harry off guard. For a moment, the darkness around them seemed lighter. They sat quietly for a while until the stillness of the night was interrupted by the sharp clearing of a familiar throat. "Mr. Potter. Mr. Malfoy." Both turned around to see the imposing figure of Professor McGonagall. The headmistress stood with her arms crossed at the edge of the clearing. Her gaze was stern, but her eye sparkled in a way Harry couldn't quite interpret. "What, may I ask, are you two doing out here at such a late hour? The curfew has been in effect for hours, and you both know very well that you should not be outside your common rooms." Harry opened his mouth to respond, but Draco was quicker. "Professor McGonagall, we..." He hesitated, searching for a plausible explanation. "We needed some fresh air." The headmistress raised a skeptical eyebrow. "Fresh air? On the school steps? At night? An interesting choice." Harry felt his face flush. "It was my fault, Professor," he blurted out. I couldn't sleep and came outside. Draco just found me and wanted to make sure I didn't get into trouble." Draco shot Harry a sideways glance, his eyes widening slightly in surprise. But he said nothing, letting Harry take the lead. McGonagall shook her head slightly, though a hint of a smile played on her lips. "A noble gesture, Mr. Malfoy, if true, which I can hardly believe, given your history. Nevertheless, rules are rules. The two of you will report to the trophy room on the 3rd floor tomorrow morning to spend an hour cleaning the trophy cases, without magic." Harry and Draco exchanged glances. "And now," McGonagall continued, her tone sharper, "get to your respective dormitories before I add another hour to your punishment. And Potter, remember, Gryffindor may stand for bravery, but it is no excuse for recklessness." The two nodded sheepishly and headed back to their dormitories. Harry felt Draco's hand lightly brush against his, and a quick glance to his right revealed Draco pressing his lips together, likely to stifle a grin. "Great," Draco muttered as they reached the grand staircase. "I've just volunteered for scrubbing trophy cases. Without magic." Harry chuckled softly. "That was nice of you." Maybe McGonagall even believed it. "Perhaps," Draco replied dryly. Then his tone softened. "But I suppose it was worth the trouble." Harry paused briefly, turning to look at him. "Do you think so?" Draco met his gaze, his eyes sparkling in the gentle glow of the torchlight that lined the corridors. "Yes," he finally said softly. "Yes, I do." A moment of silence passed between them before Draco cleared his throat and turned away. "Good night, Potter. I suppose I'll see you tomorrow for cleaning." "Good night, Malfoy," Harry replied, watching him until he disappeared around the corner. A faint smile played on Harry's face, and warmth filled his chest. As the dark-haired boy climbed the spiral staircase to the Gryffindor Tower, he couldn't stop thinking about the last few hours. The brief moment of connection, Draco's words, his changed demeanor, and then McGonagall's sudden interruption. Though tired, Harry found it hard to sleep. His thoughts kept circling back to Draco, the way his eyes had sparkled, the way his voice had softened. Something had shifted within Harry. What did it mean? And, more importantly, what did it mean for them? Meanwhile, the blonde-haired boy lay in his own bed in the Slytherin dormitory, the curtains drawn around him. The muffled sound of the Black Lake seeped through the thick walls, but the rhythmic beating of his heart was unmistakable. He had hope that Harry felt something for him beyond enmity. Draco knew that his feelings for the dark-haired boy went deeper, and had for some time. Their rivalry was merely a facade, maintained because he still bore the name Malfoy. "Potter," Draco murmured softly, closing his eyes. A faint smile crept onto his lips before sleep finally overtook him. The next morning, as the sun rose over Hogwarts, Harry and Draco, armed with buckets and brushes, stood in front of the trophy cases in the awards room and began scrubbing in silence. Neither of them spoke, but the atmosphere between them was less tense than Harry had expected. They didn't speak until the task was done. Harry occasionally noticed the blonde boy's covert glances, but couldn't make sense of Draco's altered behavior. He figured the war was over, and no one had to play the roles imposed upon them anymore. Apparently, that applied to Draco too, who now seemed free to be himself. Harry liked the new Draco. When the hour was up, they left the room. Draco made a decision and decided to take a gamble. He turned to Harry and said, "Meet me outside the castle tonight. I want to show you something." Harry looked at him in astonishment. "We just finished serving detention for yesterday, and you want to risk getting into trouble again?" The blonde boy smirked slightly and said, "What's the matter, Potter? Scared?" Harry grinned in return. "Not at all," he replied, and they headed off to class. Shortly before midnight, Harry descended the grand staircase, wondering if this was really such a good idea. But curiosity about what Draco wanted to show him outweighed his doubts. Damn Gryffindor bravery. He found Draco sitting on the steps outside the castle and sat down beside him. Draco turned to him and smiled. "I was worried you wouldn't come." Harry said, "I wasn't sure if I would," grinning as he looked down at the ground. "So, what is it you wanted to show me?" Draco suddenly stood up, extending a hand to Harry. "Do you trust me?" he asked. Harry nodded, caught off guard by the question, even though he couldn't truly answer it himself. Once, he wouldn't have trusted Draco an inch, he knew that. But today felt different, with Draco's changed demeanor and that charming smile. Harry startled at the thought. Why did he find Draco's smile charming, or his eyes captivating? He wasn't even gay. Draco pulled him from his thoughts. "Then come with me," he said, offering no explanation of where they were headed. Harry followed him down the gravel path toward the Black Lake. The cold bit at his skin, but the crisp night air felt oddly calming. Draco led him to a small clearing by the lake's edge, where the water shimmered like liquid silver under the moonlight. Taking out his wand, Draco conjured a soft, melancholic melody that floated through the air. "Do you know how to dance, Potter?" Harry laughed incredulously. "What? No, not really." "Well," Draco said with a hint of shyness, "there's no better time to learn." Hesitant, Harry took Draco's outstretched hand. The touch was warm, a stark contrast to the cold night air. A spark seemed to shoot through Harry's arm, stealing his breath. He looked up, and for a moment, their gazes locked, far more intense than Harry had anticipated. Draco's silver eyes glittered in the moonlight, and Harry's heart raced. The melody began, and Draco guided Harry in slow, careful steps. At first, Harry was clumsy, stepping on Draco's feet and mumbling apologies. But to his surprise, Draco only smiled, a genuine, soft smile. "Relax, Harry," Draco said quietly, his tone almost gentle. "It's just a dance." "Easy for you to say," Harry muttered, but he tried to let the music guide him. Gradually, he found the rhythm, and their movements became smoother. Their hands remained intertwined, and Harry noticed how secure Draco's grip felt. "You're better than you think," Draco eventually said, pulling Harry a little closer. Their bodies were now mere inches apart, the warmth between them pushing back the night's chill. Harry wanted to say something, but the words caught in his throat. All he could feel was Draco's closeness, the sound of the music, and the way Draco's gaze kept drifting to his lips. "Draco," Harry began, his voice barely a whisper. "What?" Draco asked, his voice just as soft, almost fragile. His eyes searched Harry's face, the tension between them nearly palpable. Harry didn't know what compelled him, whether it was the music, the moonlight, or the fact that Draco Malfoy was so close he could feel his breath. Before he could second-guess himself, he closed his eyes and leaned in. Draco froze for only a moment before leaning forward slightly, and their lips met. It wasn't a fiery, passionate kiss, but a tentative, hesitant one, a test. But as soon as their lips touched, something ignited within Harry. Warmth spread through him, and he felt Draco step closer, his grip on Harry's hand tightening slightly. When they pulled apart, they stood there, breathless. Draco nervously ran a hand through his blonde hair, a small, uncertain smile on his lips. "Well, that was unexpected," he murmured, his cheeks noticeably flushed. Harry grinned, masking his own embarrassment with a lopsided smile. "Maybe. But it felt right." "Right," Draco repeated, as though testing the word on his tongue. He shook his head slightly before meeting Harry's gaze directly. "You never stop surprising me, Potter." "I could say the same about you," Harry replied, their gazes lingering as an unspoken understanding passed between them. They eventually sat by the lake's edge, where Draco cast a warming charm. The music had faded, but the silence wasn't empty. It was comfortable, filled with unspoken questions and a newfound connection. As the first rays of dawn lit the sky, Hogwarts began to stir, but for Harry and Draco, the world had subtly, profoundly shifted. Returning to the castle, they parted ways without a word, Draco heading toward the dungeons with a brief nod, and Harry to the Gryffindor Tower. The days that followed made returning to normal impossible. Their glances across the Great Hall, in the corridors, and during detention carried unspoken messages, more eloquent than words could ever be. It didn't go unnoticed. Ron and Hermione, in particular, couldn't ignore Harry's absent-mindedness. "Harry, are you okay?" Hermione finally asked one evening in the common room. "You seem distracted." Ron snorted, chewing on a chocolate frog. "Maybe he's thinking about Ginny." Harry flinched. Ginny, of course. She'd tried to talk to him again, but Harry had made excuses each time. It felt wrong, especially now. The evolving connection between Harry and Draco faced challenges, public whispers, and internal struggles. Yet, with each small moment of honesty and vulnerability, they built something real, something worth fighting for. By the end of the school year, as they met once more by the Black Lake, their journey together was only beginning. This was the hardest yet best mistake I've ever made, Draco admitted, a soft smile on his lips. Harry laughed, taking his hand. Not a mistake. It was exactly what we needed, the start of something new. And as they kissed under the moonlight, it was clear, this was only the beginning. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this little story. I'd really appreciate a like and a subscription. See you next time. Yours, Vision Maverick.